Hi everyone, I wanted to review some aspects of evolution for you prior to your test. Just sort of as a discussion, we had talked about these over the course of the unit and have reviewed these in some aspects, but I wanted to put this out there, especially for those of you that maybe have missed some class, just review this prior to the test. Some of these causes of evolution we went into pretty good detail on. Others we did not really focus on, but we get into those in a little more greater depth in AP Bio. But I do want you to know all 5 of these. And again, we watched the video on the 5 fingers of evolution that go into explanation for these as well. But I wanted to just write them out there. Small population size. So when your population is small, you are susceptible to more wild changes in that allele frequency. Imagine 2 populations, one's very large, one's very small. You know that in the large population, if some sort of natural disaster or event were to happen, whatever happens to those individuals during that event, it's not going to make a huge difference on the allele frequencies in that larger population. But when the population is very small, it is susceptible to what we call genetic drift. And we covered 2 examples of this. We covered the bottleneck effect and the founder's effect. Both of these are examples wherein small populations, should something happen, you see evolution on a greater scale because it more dramatically shifts those allele frequencies. And so during the bottleneck effect, you'd see some sort of natural disaster take out some individuals in a population, and along with those individuals go their alleles, and so you see that shift in the allele frequency. The founder's effect is an example of drift in which a small subset of a larger population separates from that population and forms their own group. Okay, so that new group, that new population, the allele frequencies will only be represented by those original founders. So small population size can definitely play a role in causing evolution. Another thing that can happen that causes evolution is non-random mating. Now, we did not go into detail on this, but you can imagine a scenario where if everybody's just mixing alleles freely, you're going to basically get that same allele frequency from generation to generation, as we went over in the 5 fingers of evolution video. However, if individuals in that population start to show preferential mating, in other words, there's certain specific pairings that occur within that population, whoever's pairing up more frequently, you're going to see a shift towards those alleles. Now, this is an example of sexual selection. And we did not go into this as an example, but any nature lovers out there will know that specifically in the bird world, there are all these elaborate rituals and dance routines and songs that birds perform. And females tend to prefer the birds that perform the songs and the dances the best. So that's a form of non-random mating. That is sexual selection. Another example from the bird world is the peacock, right? Sexual selection basically states that only the males with the brightest, biggest plumage will reproduce. And that's because the females prefer those males in those instances. Another thing that will cause evolution is mutation. This is, I think, a pretty obvious one. So when we look at the word mutation, there's a pretty good history there. We know how mutations work. It's a change to the genetic code. They are rare events that occur. They are very nonspecific. They happen throughout the genome, but they do happen at a very low rate. So we know that if you're introducing changes to the genetic code, if you're literally creating new alleles, we know that that's going to cause evolution, because evolution is defined as the change in allele frequency of a population over time. Another natural event that will cause populations to evolve involves what we call gene flow. And put simply, this is the immigration or emigration of individuals within a population. So again, we can go to the bird world. When birds fly into and out of different parts of the world, they take with them their alleles. So when they either leave or when they join, they're rapidly skewing whatever that allele frequency is before or after they leave. So gene flow definitely causes evolution. We did not go into a lot of detail there. And last but not least, I want to mention natural selection. So natural selection, we definitely went into a lot of detail about. This is basically how adaptations are created in populations. In other words, when a certain environment favors certain phenotypes or disfavors other phenotypes, we see that those that survive, those that have high fitness, are the ones that pass on their genes. And so the next generation tends to look, behave, act like that group that was selected for. So we went over many examples of natural selection throughout the last couple of weeks. To piggyback on that too, we also talked about artificial selection and how this is sort of an accelerated form of selection in which humans are oftentimes doing the selecting. So, be able to discern the difference between natural and artificial selection, be able to define. Again, there are many examples of natural selection that we went over, but it's basically nature is saying yes or no to a certain phenotype and indirectly is saying yes or no to those genotypes. And so when a certain genotype is said no to, which is to say the organism that carries those genotype, those alleles will be removed from the population. And so we tend to see that shift in natural selection as a means of causing evolution. Again, it's the only one of these 5 that leads to adaptation directly. In other words, the organisms that survive this are better adapted to their environment, which is not necessarily true for the other 4 examples. So an example of artificial selection that we talked about, well, evolving stem is the best example that we have for artificial selection. You actually artificially selected for bacteria that can better form a biofilm on a bead day in, day out. So that's an excellent example of artificial selection. But we also talked about farming and dog breeding as examples of artificial selection. You could also mention bacteria that have developed antibiotic-resistant genes. That is an inadvertent artificial selection on our part by selecting for bacteria that are more and more resistant to our current array of antibiotics. So again, if you want further review on this, you can go back to the 5 Fingers of Evolution video. But all of these ideas will be assessed in some way on your test. So just keep those in mind as you review. Thanks.